Hey everyone, welcome to this webinar today. I'm Greg Nettle and I serve as president of Stadia. Just opened the doors to this webinar. Really excited about this one. Come on in. Hey, as you come on in, the chat room's open. Let us know where you're from, who you are. Would love to see that. Want to let you know that the Q&A line on this webinar will be opened as well. Please ask your questions on that Q&A tab down at the bottom of the screen. And then feel free to chat with one another throughout the webinar. Tell Janie what nice hair she has and me what bad hair I have and so forth, that, as we get through this. Great to have you, Bill, from Fort Lauderdale, and Dean from Minnesota. Hope it's not too cold up there, my friend. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. We have a lot of people joining us today, so we'll let them get into the room.
We all have longer hair these days in quarantine.
Yes, yes. Scott Steers from Annapolis, welcome, man. A lot to talk about in this webinar about how to lead a team virtually. Really excited to have Janie Mahaffey with us on this webinar. She's a rock star leader and really knows a ton about this. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. Just a reminder, love to interact with you and have Q&A. So use the Q&A tab on the bottom of the screen, and then just feel free to chat with one another throughout the webinar. Janie, you're over in the Pittsburgh area. You're not far from me. I'm in just south of Cleveland, Ohio, Canton, Akron area. It's kind of a gloomy gray day here today.
It's surprisingly sunny here. It's usually constant gray, so we've got a little gift today. It's nice.
Yeah, you're not too far from us, but that's fantastic. Okay, everyone, we're going to get started here in just a minute. I'm Greg Nettle. I serve as president of Stadia Church Planting. It's so good to be with you for this hour. We have a lot to talk about with how to lead a virtual team, and really exciting to have Janie Mahaffey with us and all that she brings to the Stadia team. Just a reminder, use the Q&A to answer questions, and then feel free to chat with one another there online. Let me give you just a little bit of background here about Stadia. Stadia has been and is a 100% virtual organization. We've always been that way. I've served as president for 8 years now and have led virtually through that entire time. And when I say that, that means we literally have no office space anywhere in the country or around the world. We currently have about 70 employees, and they're from literally all over the place, different time zones. And we, meet out of our homes, just like this. You can see I'm in my home office. Janie, where are you right now? Are you in a home office?
Home. Did a little different backdrop today, but still home.
Yeah, and so this is the way we kind of do business all the time. So this pandemic basically is kind of business as usual for us. And it certainly has escalated the number of hours we're spending on Zoom, but it's what we do normally and how our team functions normally. Now, unfortunately, we're unable to travel, which is what a lot of us do, fairly extensively throughout the United States and around the world. And so that's happening on Zoom a lot more, and we're doing a lot more innovation with global trips and US domestic trips now, trying to figure all that virtually and so forth. Okay, Janie, you've been with Stadia. How long have you been with Stadia now?
It'll be 10 years in May.
10 years. And Janie, you've seen a lot of transition with Stadia over those years, a lot of different growth. Your current title is?
Vice President of Culture and Team Development.
Yeah, Culture and Team Development. So I love that title, and Janie's amazing at it. Janie's been having lots and lots of churches, big churches calling her saying, can you help us with all this virtual stuff in the midst of this pandemic? And she's been so gracious to help out. But I don't know of anyone better in the country to do and talk about what we're going to talk about today than Janie Mahaffey. Janie, again, talk about your journey a little bit today to where you are now.
Sure. I started 10 years ago when Matt and I were in the church planting world, and Stadia was a small organization. We were 12 people, and I was looking for a way to be full-time mom and part-time use my marketing brain in a place. And Tom Jones and Brent Folk invited me to come and be a part of the team. Back then, we were virtual, but we didn't identify ourselves that way. We were just a bunch of church planting people across the country who were doing big God-sized things together. And over time, as you came on and the vision of church planting and caring for children came together, we started seeing God's favor just explode our ministry. And as a result, our church planting impact grew. We just celebrate our 1,000th church plant, which is so exciting. And we're well on our way to get to the next 1,000 much quicker. So with that growth also came the growth of our team. And so we had a team of 12 10 years ago to now we have a team of between staff volunteers and staff team members, paid staff, 50, 60, 70 team members to where we are now. And what we realized was, we do have a pretty unique thing here. We just organically came together, and now we have people from New York to California to Florida to Pittsburgh and Northern Ohio. And we knew, we need to be a little bit more intentional with how we engage the team, build culture, make sure we're all on the same mission together. And so a couple years ago, I had the opportunity to shift gears, come on full time, and take marketing focus of communicating with our audiences of our planters and partners and investors, and start taking some energy and focusing on intentionality with our team, helping our team communicate well, integrate, taking the great vision that you and our other leaders cast and getting them set up for a win so they can put legs on that vision despite being virtual, and making sure that that doesn't seem distant.
Yeah, and so you could imagine as the staff has grown over the years, the really rapid growth, the challenges with virtual and learning it when there's not a lot of people out there to learn from at this point. We've done our best, but most of what we're going to share today has been through trial and error and sharing with you a lot of things we've learned so that you don't have to make the same mistakes that we've made along the way. Now, we use this format, Zoom, all the time. We use some other formats we're going to talk about, but Zoom is the platform we use for almost everything. We'll talk about that later. We do this for global meetings with staff. We do this for domestic US meetings with staff, with our partners globally, with our partners domestic, and it's been a great tool. I just thought this would be fun, Janie. I had a day last week. This is kind of a normal day, and you could do the same. But my first meeting of the day was with 5 staff to plan an upcoming advisory team retreat, which is now also going to be held virtually. So that started my day. And then I had an hour-long meeting with my executive assistant, Angela, who's amazing. I live in Canton, Ohio, Canton-Akron area in Northern Ohio. My assistant lives in Austin, Texas. So that's she's a virtual assistant. She's an amazing assistant, and it's worked out fantastic to have someone who is literally, halfway across the country be my assistant. So I had a meeting with her. I had a break after that. So I got on my Peloton exercise bike, rode for 30 minutes, which is fascinating because I was connected virtually to an entire class of bicycle riders, still staying in that digital world. And then after that, this was really fun. I had lunch with 6 of our staff members from our project management team. So sat here, eating some yogurt and a banana while they're eating. And it was just a time for us to connect and for me to hear what's going on in their areas and to connect with them relationally. After that, we had a webinar that just like this with 500 church leaders from across the country for an hour. And then I had a meeting that a partner scheduled with me and 4 other leaders. And so that was that's pretty much a normal day, I think, for myself, but really for all of the Stadia staff. And Janie, as we go through this time and we talk about virtual, what is the primary driver right now, would you say, behind all of this virtual stuff?
Well, I think the key, two keys. One is the need for the video communication as a key platform. I forget how much we take it for granted of how much we can develop relationship over video and how much we can get accomplished. Going through that list you talk about, I think about how many times we get around to finally meeting our team members in person and how surprised I am that I don't know what they look like from the bottom half down. Ashley Stewart, I met her at Exponential and I'm like, oh, you're a lot taller than I thought, because I never met her. But I feel very close, very engaged with her, very on mission with her, because we work constantly in this environment. And as we've helped other people quickly make the shift to working with their teams and collaborating, the biggest thing I tell them is you've got to figure out a video tool. We love Zoom. There's all kinds of them out there, but Zoom has great reliability, so many bells and whistles that we can lean into. And the fact that I take it for granted now that I can do brainstorming over video. I can do deep, heavy project management work. I've prayed with people over video. I've coached, been coached. I've argued over video. And, you know, as Brene Brown says, rumbled over video and apologized and had deep connection. And it takes a little bit to get used to. And we did that so long ago that I think it's so easy for us that as we're helping new teams come on, we've got to realize, okay, at first you got to get used to this setting. It's not very kinetic because you're stuck in your box. And so you have to remember to take long breaks and be physical outside of this environment. But once you get over the initial weirdness of it, I think it has so much potential for connecting and bringing in people together from all over that you wouldn't normally have in a physical setting.
Yeah, I would say I agree with you 100%. And I would say during this pandemic time, I think the number one reason that we want to use the Zoom platform or this type of virtual meeting is to develop relationships and to maintain relationships. Friends, if you don't hear anything else today, right now, during this time, relationships are the number one priority. And Janie, that's playing out in a lot of different ways in Stadia world. Talk about the relationship piece within the Stadia team, and then I'll talk a little bit about it with some of our partners and investors.
Yeah, I think the key beginning of that is good leadership that values relationships. Relationships is a stated value for us. And so that begins with what you do really well, and that is casting vision, being very clear with our team of where we're heading so we all have something to look forward to together, being very clear with what our values are and reiterating that as much as possible. And so how that plays out is we have regular meeting rhythms that we lean into where we come together as leadership, we come together as a team. We approach those meetings in a holistic way. They're not just come together and get it done kind of meetings. We come together, you and other leaders ask about our souls. What's our spiritual life like? Especially right now, that's super important. How's our family? How are things of balancing online school and my husband here, and we're all jockeying for internet and caring about those kinds of things, while also having really high expectations for us. Impact is a value of Stadia and urgency, and we've got too important of a mission to let this get in the way. Every child needs a church, and so we're going to still expect our team to be the high impact, get it done kind of people who they have always proved themselves to be. And where leadership is important in that is having trust in our team. And it's trust both ways. Trusting them to get their job done while knowing that we're in virtual settings and we're not together, that you're not going to be checking in constantly to see, are they getting their job done? But also caring for your staff and enough to encourage them to set boundaries, to be healthy, to make sure they're not letting their workday eat into their home life, having a hard stop at the end of the day. So I think all of those things are super important in any work environment, but when you add the virtual component and the weird place we're in right now with this pandemic, I think leaders have to be especially intentional to do those kinds of things. I think in our tools, I think it's really important to have those regular meeting rhythms, but also use your tools to have stop-bys and check-ins, because you don't have the advantage of walking by somebody's office and seeing they're in there and just checking in on them. And so it's important to send a text or call somebody up on Zoom and just say, how are you doing? What's going on? What are you getting done? Where do you have questions? Where can we bring clarity? And our team is really intentional about doing that kind of thing.
Okay, so in your virtual world, friends, I would say right now, every Zoom meeting you have or whatever platform you're using, make sure you're spending time relationally with the people you lead or being led by. That is just vital during this time to make sure your staff relationships, your volunteer relationships are healthy. So one of the things we're doing, with Stadia, we have investors across the country, we have church partners across the country and around the world. And one of the things I'm doing during this time is I have my assistant just schedules, it's called 15 Minutes Coffee with Greg. Sounds kind of goofy, but it has been an absolute blast. And so I've been having coffee with people, I just had coffee with an older couple in Florida who invest with Stadia. And literally all it was for me to talk with them. So the first time the man had traveled to Ecuador with me, Janie, but I'd never met his wife before. First time I met his wife, she was a darling prayer warrior. We're online together and I'm just saying, hey, tell me how this pandemic's affecting you. How can I pray for you personally? I prayed with them and for them. They prayed for Stadia and for me. I was able to give them, there's no financial ask being made. It's 100% relational. Let me encourage you, church leaders, take the time right now, set up 15-minute coffees with people, with your key volunteers, not to be asking them to do something, just to check in and let them know you care. Relationships are the top priority. The second thing I would say is this gives you structure as well. So, Janie, we can walk through, we've doubled up our meetings during this pandemic, actually. Talk about kind of our meeting structure now. Yeah.
So our navigation team, our leadership team has always gotten together on a regular basis. We have felt the need to bring together our directors, our managers, our team managers more regularly right now. Partly so because there's so many quick moving pieces that we need to make sure we're all calibrating and getting on the same page. Also just to check in and make sure everybody is healthy, strong, staying on mission. And then our team, we're going to start ramping up our team rhythms. We usually meet once a quarter as a whole team for a vision casting celebration, where are we heading kind of meeting. We offer some virtual connects periodically for professional development and personal development. We did a fitness challenge and some fun things. We're going to double up on coming together and doing both what is God doing through Stadia kind of discussions, what's the work we need to work on, and then adding in some fun components. We know that next week is bring your kid to work day. Well, everybody has their kid at work right now, but we're gonna do some fun things to help us celebrate the fact that our kids are part of our mission right now. How fun is it that our kids get to watch every day the work we get to do and even more greatly connect with our mission? And so those regular rhythms of meetings make sure that not only are we staying on mission, but that everybody feels heard and valued and engaged. In the 5 dysfunctions of the team, he talks about how not everybody needs to get their way necessarily, but they need to feel like they're heard. And by having convened meetings where people can expect to come and be able to contribute to the conversation, that allows for that to happen. I would add to that also that in the virtual space, spontaneous meetings happen too. There's a lot of times I'm sitting here and I'll get a drive-by is what I call it. So I'll get a ring on my phone or a text saying, hey, can you meet about something? And we'll start talking about something and we'll realize, oh, such and such needs to be in this meeting. And so it's really important that we as leaders reach out and get the people who need to be involved in those conversations. Because again, it's not like back in the day at Traders Point where I was in a church office and you could walk by and you'd see 3 people in a glass office and you go, oh, there's a conversation there that I might need to help with. You don't have that physical view. So it's all the more important we're intentional to make those spontaneous.
Okay, so Janie, talk about that drop in and drop out feel. We have a question about, do you just lose that? Like, We don't, obviously, we know that at Stadia, but talk about how that actually happens in real time for us.
Yeah, for us, we use it through Zoom. And I think investing in a good Zoom account is really valuable, especially right now. It can happen in a lot of ways, but for us, we're able to pull up our directory and I can see anybody on our team because all of our team has a Zoom account. And it's a green light, red light thing. If you have your green light on and I just need to throw something by you or need a quick opinion on something, I can stop in and just ring your doorbell. And it's the equivalent of you having your office door open in a physical office. That can happen through sending somebody a text or picking up the phone, but whatever it is, it's really important it happens in the virtual environment just as much as it does physically.
Yeah, and so in lots of times, if I'm away from my desk or away from my computer, what will happen is Justin or Nate they'll actually just text me and say, hey, can you jump on Zoom real quick? And yeah, I walk back to my office and I open my Zoom account and immediately we're, face to face again in a Zoom meeting. So it happens a lot more than what most people think. You do have to be more intentional as a general rule, but the open door meetings do still happen the same as in a physical location. So we have relationship. Yeah, go ahead, Janie.
I was going to say, especially for managers right now, as you're transitioning teams into this environment, it's all the more important for the leader to take the proactive move of doing the drop-in, the drive-by, because I think a lot of staff at first are like, I don't know if they're busy. I don't want to disturb or interrupt something, so I don't know the best way to reach out. And so all the more important why a leader needs to just check in, even if it's for no reason. You calling me up and saying, hey, just want to see, are you good for blah, 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 whatever's coming up next week, it gives me the space to be able to throw stuff at you that normally I wouldn't think, now I do all the time, but we're used to this environment. But when you're getting started, it takes some muscle development in that area.
Okay, Jane, I want us to talk a little bit about the advantages of virtual. So a lot of people are going, oh, we have to do this for now. And I would say nothing's going to be the same in the future. And so let's talk about what are the advantages of virtual. A lot of churches have multi-sites and virtual Zoom is way more effective than trying to get everybody together in person. And for one thing, one of the things I love about Stadia is we have such a high percentage of, our financial resources that go straight to our church planters and partners around the world. And that's largely, we don't have any buildings. We don't pay, any rent. We're not buying and putting up buildings. And my goodness, is that a blessing when you don't have to deal with that. If it's done well, we have found that virtual can be as good as and often better than meeting in person. Janie, talk about our first virtual Stadia staff retreat this past year.
Yeah, so we shifted gears to taking all of our staff coming together, all 60 staff members at the time coming together physically for a retreat and said, you know what, let's see what we can do to save a whole lot of money and have some efficiencies in travel and accessibility to get everybody together in this virtual environment. And I think we all went in a little skeptically thinking, is this going to work? What do we need to think through intentionally to make sure it works well? We ended up with about 5 hours on one day and about 3 hours on another day. And the key learnings from it were that our team, as we use the tools well to where we had large group sessions and broke people into small groups, leaned into a lot of the Zoom tools, we were able to bring in guest speakers that we wouldn't have had access to because we could pull from anywhere in the United States. And we're thinking about even around the world, where can we pull guest speakers in? We knew that we needed to create long breaks because this, again, it's not a really kinetic space and you're kind of locked into an area. So we knew we needed to pace ourselves, have longer breaks. And it was really a fun aha. This was something that we brainstormed about, but it ended up being a fantastic thing of, we're going to start hearing the word a lot, the phygital perspective. And that's bringing the digital component together with a physical.
And phygital is a real word, by the way. It's Phygital.
Used
and
a lot.
Phygital is vital. Yeah, so talk about what we did phygitally.
Yeah, so we had the agenda set up for us to be together, not together virtually, but in advance, our marketing and events team pulled together just this amazing retreat box. And so before the retreat, we received our retreat kit with a sign that said "Do not open until retreat day." And then on retreat day that morning, we opened up. We got our Yeti mugs, and we had snacks just like we would if we were coming together in a meeting room. And then every hour, different people would cue us on different packages to open. So we had our celebration component of having our confetti when we celebrate the number of churches we planted.
We had these poppers that you could pop with the confetti, but nobody wants to mess in the house. But they make poppers that stay attached. The strings come out, but they stay attached. So those were awesome.
They were very valued, so no one had to clean up the mess afterwards, but we still got to celebrate. We had fidget toys we shared. We had different as we went into the second day, we had a really great soul care component that Greg gave us some great teaching. We had Mindy Caliguire come in and talk about soul care. In between, we sent everybody out for some quiet time and a time of solitude and retreat, and that really teed up that second day well. And I was just really surprised at how beautifully that day came together, that our team felt very valued, to be encouraged to take that time. And then Greg had, while you were in Israel, you had gotten us tear bottles and talked to us about the value of those tears, whether they were tears of sorrow or joy. And those were sent to us. And then we ended with communion together. And I wouldn't think of that being powerful in this kind of setting. Was blown away at the small group prayer time and what has come out of that, that some of those small group teams still meet and pray together because of what was built in that retreat environment.
Okay, so the crazy thing for me, that was kind of a turning point for me, because we did it because we needed to do it to cut some financial expenses the first time. And I was really disappointed because I loved getting together in person. And coming out of that retreat, when we sent the survey out to our entire staff, I think every single person said this was the best staff retreat we ever had. Now, for our 60 employees at that time, Janie, I want to say we spent that retreat with the digital boxes going out and all the stuff we bought for people. It cost us somewhere around $5,000 to $8,000, maybe not even that much.
Right.
And normally for us to fly people in for a week, we're looking at a $100,000 price tag to pull that off. So look at the financial savings again that we could put direct to ministry on the ground, you know, and not that you shouldn't meet together. I'm just saying, man, it was a huge advantage. And so I'm not saying we won't ever meet together in person, but I think we've talked about a rhythm of once every 3 years now. We may bring our whole staff together, but in the other 2 years, we'll do it virtually because it's just as effective. Now, we can also, friends, you need to expect high productivity from your people, okay? But come back to this, because it's low control, because you can't control when they're working necessarily, or, you know, even their work habits, but it's high accountability. So at Stadia, we expect A+ productivity from everyone. And, you know, most of the time at Stadia, we have to pull people back in their hours saying, you're working too much from home, you know, hey, you need to tone that back. Virtually allows flexibility and freedom. So we encourage our staff, take advantage of virtual world. I'll say to Janie, go to your son's baseball games, go to their band concerts at school, whatever they're doing, right, Janie? You know, my gosh, you're helping, you know, school your kids at home right now during this time, right? And yet you're still highly productive at Stadia, just as more productive than ever. And so take advantage of that flexibility, and virtual allows that. Now, here's one last advantage, I think, and that is that the next generation down from us, the younger generation, probably many of you, they thrive in this virtual atmosphere, okay? They are natives to digital. And so don't, you know, underestimate that. Janie, let's switch to some of the disadvantage, some of the challenges of digital as well right now. Talk about what we supply for people to make this happen.
So right now we supply cell phones, and we supply some very intentional training to prepare them to treat their workspace like a workspace. I think that one of the disadvantages is that you have to really change your thinking of how you approach your day, but you have to look at it as, what did I do in my physical spaces? So I remember when I very first started virtually, I was a hot mess. I did not do it well. I didn't approach my work and set aside appropriate workspace. I let times bleed into each other. And it was a quick aha that if I'm going to do this well, I've got to start shifting gears. And so we have to, as we onboard our team now, or even as these, all of you all who are making this shift, you need to not assume that your team is going to get that. And so really being prescriptive of, you need to have a quiet office that's a place where you can focus and have clear, respectful conversations. You need to make sure that, and this is hard right now, but that kids are, I love that in Stadia, because children are our highest value. I love that my kids can come in and say hi, but they need to say hi and we need to move on, because we've got to stay focused on what we need to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love it when your boys come walk in the room and I get to talk with them. And I get to do that a lot more probably than most people that work in a local setting. It's surprising how much. If my son Elijah comes walking in here, the first thing I do is say, hey, Elijah, if he walked in right now, I'd say, Elijah, hey, come into this webinar. And we're talking about this, and I'd love for you all to meet my son. But then I'm like, okay, Elijah, now, head back to Fortnite. And, but that's a really important thing. So Janie, when we talk about, we supply a cell phone allowance. We actually don't buy individual cell phones, but we do give people a cell phone allowance. We give them, they also have, the laptop or whatever.
Right. So we supply them a laptop with a camera. We usually supply a second monitor, because when you're in this kind of workspace, having video and having the stuff you're working on is really important. We're working out new ways to provide internet where extra internet's needed. Having quality internet is huge in this environment. If there's delays or hiccups in the Zoom, it's the same as having bad communication skills, because what you're trying to do can't get through. So that intentionality of providing platforms that are collaborative beyond video are really important too. We use Asana as a project management tool. We use Salesforce as our database, and all of those tools are needed in a regular work environment. But I would say they're even more important in collaborating virtually, because you need to have the central space where if you can't stop by somebody's office, you can go to find what you need and access it from a lot of different places.
Yeah, so all of that's really important. Janie, I don't want to leave this thing. You talked about it a little bit, but the training is absolutely essential, okay? Because some people are going to pick this up really quickly and how to use this stuff, and others are going to be, really challenged by it. And you've got to get people trained. Now, if that training's not intentional, it won't happen. So it has to be very intentional. But here's the deal, friends. We all need to know how to do this stuff today, period. People in the business world, global companies, this is how business is conducted. I was on a Zoom call yesterday with the global planning director from Cru, which is this enormous, Campus Crusade for Christ organization. And we just expect that we're going to be able to jump on a Zoom call, or we're going to be able to, communicate virtually. That's expected of people today. And you all in your teams need to expect that of your people. Janie, it also requires IT support.
Yes, we are spoiled. I will say that, but it's because we've realized over time we need that kind of infrastructure to make this work well. And so we have, our IT team, Rachel, David, and all of our hub members are growing and understanding what are the things we need to provide for video support, for supporting all those platforms. And I think that's going to be probably the biggest area of growth for our churches and organizations coming out of this, is the realization, we use the word phygital, that I think the new normal is going to be the combination of physical spaces and digital spaces coming together. And so having qualified people who can make sure that IT is supported well is going to be more vital than ever.
Yeah, because there's going to be, but like with any technology, there's challenges that come up on a regular basis. And so if you're moving into digital world, which most churches are now by necessity, you have to have some dedicated person or persons who are going to take care of those challenges, because the minute something goes down with technology, it can cripple you. So you have to be able to get somebody to get that fixed right away. Now, I would say also something you have to deal with is make sure when we talk about challenges that you're keeping people relationally connected. And so you have to work extra hard at that, just to be very candid, in digital world. It requires Janie mentioned this, thinking through who should be invited into meetings. You have to be really intentional with that. And you should do that in your physical location as well, but it's extra important, I think, in digital world. Okay, Janie, let's talk about when we meet. We talk about meeting in small groups, and we kind of consider small groups really a meeting from 2 people to 8 people up to 12 people. But really, we found that once you get over 8 people on a Zoom call, the interactions, it really change. So talk about maybe some things we've learned in that 2 to 8 group size.
I have a couple things from a leader perspective is, even if it's that size or bigger, is coming in prepared, knowing that you're going to lose attention faster in this kind of environment than you do in a physical room. And so coming in, having everybody prepared in that room plus yourself is really important. I think it's really important to make sure your team members know how to use Zoom well. At the end of the webinar, we're going to put a few links on that give some good tips of just Zoom presentation, because I am all about clarity and removing barriers in communication, and clarity is a word I use a lot. So the one thing that I think is that we take for granted in our world that I'm seeing people need to figure out is how to appear on Zoom in a way that it's not a distraction from what you're trying to communicate. So having good lighting so you can see my nonverbal communication, having good sound, having a physical presence that's not distracting. There are a lot of really good videos out there from, actually, there's one from a newscaster I watched the other day, and it made me realize that when I show up having prepared my Zoom environment, it not only makes sure that I communicate well and can be heard, it shows respect, and it builds that relational component, because it shows I took the time to prepare myself to spend time with you. So especially leaders who are conducting those small meetings, I think that's super important. And then for those of us who are participating, we need to be intentional as well. And then we've talked about some of the things to make sure distractions don't happen. Make sure the dog's not barking in the room, or that you have a small space, or you use earbuds as you need them. And I think a lot of people are starting to figure that out now that Zoom is becoming so needed in this environment. But I can't emphasize enough how vital it is to make sure you do those things and don't just appreciate them, but not actually go through the act of making it happen.
And JD, we've even had to talk to some staff about where it's appropriate to Zoom from, right? So, just because you can Zoom from your bed in your pajamas doesn't mean you should. And that's crazy sounding, but you can't take that for granted with people. We sometimes have to say, hey, make sure you're in a space that's appropriate. Make sure, your dirty clothes aren't hanging from, the bedpost that, from where you're meeting, whatever.
And I think that changes for who you're meeting with too. I think because relationships are high value, when we're internal and it's a drive-by meeting, we may be more casual, and that's going to happen. But when you're getting ready for something to be prepared for, I think you do need to be intentional. At least make your bed if your bed has to be in the camera.
Yeah. And so the cool thing about meetings of 8 or less is that everyone can remain unmuted. And so that's very important. It sounds simple, but just tell people, remain unmuted so that the conversation can happen back and forth rapidly. Because when you get in a group of more than 8, you actually have to have everyone muted. And we're going to talk about why that's important. Sometimes we have people that are traveling, they're meeting in an airport, they're meeting in a coffee shop. Even if we're in a group of 8, obviously they have to have their mute on unless they're talking, just because of the distractions in the back. The other thing, for some of you who are leading organizations that aren't just a local church, please be aware of time zones when you're scheduling meetings, okay? Because you just have to do that. Now, some of the things that we do in small groups, I mentioned at the beginning of this, having lunch together really works well. It's surprising how enjoyable it is to say, hey, we're going to schedule a Zoom meeting from noon to 1. It's primarily relationally. You can do it as a work meeting as well, but bring your lunch. Now, here's the key. Everyone has to bring their lunch, okay? Or it feels stupid. And so you have lunch together. Creativity and innovation. We're innovating constantly right now at Stadia, as you all are as well. That happens extremely well in groups of 8 or smaller in the virtual world, okay? So take advantage of that. Now, Janie, let's shift to some large groups. So we would call these just 9 and up. And for us, it's now, we have in fact an all staff meeting this afternoon where we'll have 70 people on a Zoom call. Talk about how that's different.
So from the leader perspective, it is super important that you think through roles in that kind of environment. It's almost like we're preparing for a worship service. I feel like when we're preparing for those meetings, that I see you as the facilitator, one of the key communicators, and then you have Angela who's setting up the logistics, making sure the room's set up, that the recording's happening. Really important for that to be thought through, because you as the facilitator want to be able to focus on what you're communicating. And so I, as a production manager, I'm behind the scenes figuring out who's in the breakout rooms. In Zoom, it's really cool that you can either put people in random breakout groups, or you can designate and decide who's going to be in rooms based on who you want to facilitate those small groups or whatever.
Okay, Janie, I don't want you to gloss over that too quickly, because that's so important. So Janie started us with this, and it's become one of the most important things we do. So let's say you have 12 people on a Zoom call, or 70 people on a Zoom call. And like today with our staff, we're going to be talking about this past Easter weekend and what good stories that we've heard from our church planters and even in personal life. And here's what Janie's going to do. At the end of kind of me talking through this a little bit, Janie's going to say, okay, we're going into breakouts now. And instantly, everybody's divided up into groups of 6. They automatically pop into these rooms on their screens. Janie has these questions up in the chat bar that they're going to discuss. Someone has been designated as the facilitator. And then at the end of 10 minutes, the Zooms, it automatically pulls you back into the big group, and we report out as a big group. And I just love that. And that Janie has been able to, it's not that hard to do, right, Janie?
It's not at all. It is the best tool, I think, on Zoom, because it gives you the exact, if you think of everything in video environment from a physical standpoint, when you think that we would gather together in a physical room and have everybody at tables, and we would have these large group presentations, and then everybody knows in those kind of environments, to get people really working, you're going to say, okay, at your table, discuss whatever is the topic. And it creates that exact same situation. Now, the best part of it is that whereas in that physical room, you got to rein people in, and there's, you say, okay, 1 more minute, and you still have to get some table to stop talking. The power of Zoom is I can, at 1 minute, cut people off, and they're just automatically brought back to the main room. So there's a little bit of power that comes with that too. But it is a vital tool for making sure people stay engaged. Because when we have 60 people on a screen and you have 4 pages of 20 people in this grid, usually we're able to have 10-minute, 15-minute chunks of large group presentation where people stay. And let's be honest, we've got a pretty exciting mission to be a part of. So our people stay very engaged and hyped up, and we have a lot to celebrate. But if you get a presentation that's longer than that, I don't care how exciting it is, you're going to start losing people. And what those small groups do is it forces you to get back into that accountability where everybody's face is on the screen. They have to be looking in, participating. When we go from large group and everybody's muted to clear out the distractions, we require everybody to unmute going into those small groups, because as you said, it shows everybody's engaged. By unmuting, it says, even though I may not have something to say, I'm engaged in the conversation. I'm ready to participate if something does come up. So it has been one of the best tools I think we have.
Okay, so you mentioned it just in passing, but we've also learned this from us. This was a mistake that we made that we learned. When you have someone presenting, someone might be able to teach. If you're sitting in a room and your senior pastor wants to present for 40 minutes, and he can keep you engaged for 40 minutes in a local room. In Zoom, you need to reduce that time. We generally use the 50% rule. If normally in person we were going to talk for 40 minutes, we try to cut that down to 20 minutes in Zoom. or 20 minutes goes to 10 minutes. That's really vital because, again, it's the engagement factor and screen fatigue that you have to be a little bit careful. In large group setting, you know, if you're in a room with, let's say, 50 volunteers and you're saying, okay, who has a story to share about excitement and somebody that lifted up our values this past weekend in church? People will probably raise their hands and share. In virtual world, that is much more challenging because people are hesitant to jump in on a Zoom screen or whatever platform you're using. We actually will seed the answers in advance and say, okay, we have 5 good stories we're going to hear right now from different people, and those are all pre-planned. It's just as spontaneous, it's just as good, but it takes us more time, if you will, to prepare. So we plan a lot with these large groups.
And having that
Okay.
production manager role is really important, that in that you facilitating the conversation need to stay engaged in what are you hearing and how to feed off that. I can help in the behind the scenes of knowing, oh, we've got XXX coming up, we're running out of time. You and I have learned that I use text as opposed to the chat because I can text you and you can see that as kind of a production cue. And then I'm also prompting people who are on deck, you know, you're up next, be prepared, clarifying questions. So having that behind the scenes person is important so that you can stay as a leader engaged. I've tried to multitask and do all those roles before. It does not work. So highly encourage people to diversify. Plus it gives everybody an opportunity to be involved.
Okay, just want to remind one last thing here too. Zoom allows you to bring guest speakers into your staff much easier than you could if you had to bring them in person. So for instance, we had an all staff 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, Janie, and Gene Apple out, you know, leads this amazing church out in California. Well, Gene loves Stadia. I just texted him, said, Gene, would you bring a 15-minute devotional to encourage our staff? And Gene was delighted. And I didn't have to pay for Gene to fly somewhere to sit down for 15 minutes with our staff. He crushed it. Our staff, some of them were in tears. We needed to hear what he had to say. You know, and people are, you know, if somebody texted me and said, Greg, would you be willing to share about church planting or, you know, soul care from Mindy Caliguire or whatever, we're very likely to do that if our schedule's open for free. It's no big deal. And so you have access to some of the greatest leaders. We have access to some of the greatest leaders in the country virtually that we could never afford to bring in otherwise. Okay, Janie, I want us to switch to Phygital now and talk about that physical digital and how we use those together. And let's just talk just again to spur the creative ideas here with some things that we do with Phygital.
Yeah, having lunch together, I think you were talking about that. We have some meetings coming up where we're going to convene some leaders, and we talked about, do we do DoorDash or whatever to deliver lunch so that we can still have that physical component. We try to make sure that everyone has the tools they need physically. Is it a book that we're reading together, that we have the physical book there? Like I said, we've taken communion together. I think that having the physical component helps you feel united, even though you are distant from each other, and it's super important. I do want to say that while I know that all of the advantages we've talked about in virtual, I could talk all day about those. In some cases, there are places that cannot be equaled by physical in-person time together. And so I think that's a thing that we'll be talking about, of what new normal looks like for churches as we enter the post-COVID world. And what does that look like? I think we need to be asking some really hard questions of what really is required for us to be physically together, and where does the digital environment and digital opportunities open up ways that we can connect like we never have before. I was talking to Molly on our team, and she was saying, oh, it was Caitlin, and she was saying that she works with her small group of high school girls, and it's so hard to get them together, but because all of a sudden this new season has brought an opportunity to do it virtually, they got together at 10 o'clock at night. Now their parents wouldn't let them go out 10 o'clock at night to meet physically, but virtually they can come together. So I think there's so many places that this phygital world is going to be our future.
Yeah, and I think, just like reading a book together, we do that frequently as a staff. We're reading one now Brene Brown book, Lead Greatly, I think. Dare to Lead. Thank you, Janie. I mess that up all the time. And so we'll get together and, we read a chapter a week, and then, we'll take 15 minutes, half an hour to discuss that chapter in our meeting. And it's funny because we'll either send the copy of the hard book out to each staff member, or we'll just say, order it on Amazon, have it delivered, or I have mine on my Kindle, download on my app. But that's digital. It's reading a book together and then coming together digitally to share in that. There's a great tool right now. We're going to throw a couple slides up here. There's a pastor's pool, and we want you to take a look at this because this is something that you need to engage in. And so look at this down here, the website, theweeklypastorpool.com. Go to that, enroll in this because it's giving incredible insights back. Look, we don't get anything for this. This is just a tool we're using now, and thousands of churches and organizations across the country are using. This gives you real-time feedback every week about some things that are going on in church world. Now, the beauty of this is eventually you're going to be able to design your own pools as well that you'll be able to use within your church. Again, we don't get any money for this or anything. This is a free tool that we're using that we want to make available to you. Okay, Janie, let's come back now. We love this with our partners. That's Spire and Glue and Barna that are putting that together. Fantastic organizations. And I want us to, as we, if you have questions, get them in now because we're going to wrap up in just a few minutes. But this is really fun. I want to walk through. We have an advisory team meeting coming up where we would have 12 leaders coming together. It was scheduled to be in South Carolina in person. It's next week or the week after. I don't even remember. But now it's virtual. And we've worked hard. Here's the deal. When you're going to do something of length online, you really need to work hard at planning it the same way you would plan it locally, okay? So we've sent out packages in advance to our advisory team members. They're sitting in their homes ready to open. And just like if you're an advisory team member, you might want to jump off this call right now because you're going to hear everything.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. But they'll open their box and there's a Yeti mug with the Stadia logo on it. We ask them to get filled out with their favorite coffee or beverage before the meeting starts. So that's real phygital. Then we're moving into personal updates. What's going on in your church right now? Where are you, challenged personally or at your church right now? Then we take a break. Janie talked about the importance of breaks. We'll give a 15-minute break there. And typically we found, Janie, every hour you need at least a 10-minute break and maybe a 15-minute break because people have to get up and go to the restroom. They want to refill their coffee mugs. Just get up and walk around. After that, we're giving them, they open the next thing and they're getting a really cool Stadia t-shirt. And then we're going to give a Stadia update. But see what this does, it allows them to open a package. They feel all part of it. They get that t-shirt. Then we're in a large group with me for the Stadia update, but then we're dividing them into two groups for the next part. And this is really cool. So they're dividing into two groups. One group will be with our domestic church planting leaders, and they will be having interviews with some of our church planters from across the country in that small group room. In the other room, there's this really cool like Jeopardy type quiz that's going on with our global planter team. So it's really creative, really fun, moves quickly. We come back together. Their next package they open, it's a snack bag. It has like really cool gummy bears in it or, typically pretty healthy stuff, but like gummy bears. After that, we have a really cool guest speaker, Pat Gelsinger, the #1 CEO in America last year, CEO of VMware, is going to join us for an hour and talk about digital and what's going on in the tech world. We couldn't afford to fly Pat in normally. He wouldn't have the time to fly in. He's flying all over the world typically. But he had the time to give us an hour to meet virtually from his office in California. After that, we're closing, the meeting, but this is really fun. We sent Jenny's ice cream in advance. We'll be sending Jenny's ice cream in advance to everybody, a box of it, to everybody's home. They'll have the ice cream. We also sent them a board game. I think it's Uno Attack, something like that. And we're asking them to spend time with their family that night, eat the ice cream, play the game, and take pictures so we can show them the next day. you get the idea of what I'm talking about here. Do you see the creativity? The next day we have lunch together, like Janie said, in advance. Angela's lined up. DoorDash is delivering lunch to everybody at their home all across the country at the same time, so we can have a working lunch together. Be creative like that. Celebrate like that. Okay, Janie, as we wrap up, we have just a couple more minutes. What would you say to people out there who are kind of still hesitant about virtual or moving in that digital space?
I would say lean in hard to take advantage of the fact that we're at least a month, if not longer, who knows when the quarantining is going to end. And so now's the time to try it and see what works for your team, lean into the tools, bring people together and talk about what can this look like in our virtual space, so that it informs how can you lean into this in the future and be in that both physical and digital world. One other tool I want to throw out that has been really helpful to us that I think people could use, as well as Facebook Workplace. It has become kind of our water cooler space in the days of our physical world, where you would walk out and grab a snack or a cup of coffee, and that's where you just run into somebody and say, did you watch, whatever the Tiger thing is, or whatever the pop culture thing is you're connected about. The place that we do that is on Workplace. It's a Facebook area that works just like Facebook, but it's just for Stadia World. So that's where we share celebrations about new babies being born, where we share condolences about people passing away. We share pictures of our kids at work. We have contests. We do all kinds of things where we just chit chat, and that's our social space. It's not a required thing, but it's a place if you want to go hang out, and our people engage and they do it. So that's a really great tool we use. The other thing that I think is going to be really interesting in this quick shift to virtual space, and what we need to be looking at coming out of it, is how talent is raising up that I don't know would have been tapped into had we not been forced into this area. And by that, I think for our advantages, we're seeing who are the innovative, scrappy, let's figure out this new space kind of people who right now our leaders, our church leaders, need to be leaning into and saying, what do you see? How can we be using this? What are the creative ways we can lean into this? And then for church planting benefit, I think those are going to be our church planters in the future. Those are the people who are going to be creating new church environments, whether those are physical locations, campuses, physical church plants, or digital campuses, digital church plants, or the hybrid. So I think some interesting talent's going to raise out of this that we've not been able to push without such a pressure cooker environment.
Okay, and so Janie, so new talent's going to raise up, and you all need to be aware as well. Some people aren't going to make it in digital world. Okay, I hate to say that, but that's the truth. When we bring people on board now, that's one of the things that we're screening for, I guess, and being aware of. And we use some tools to do that because working digitally isn't for everyone. There are some people that may not have the discipline, quite frankly, to work out of their home and to work digitally. You're going to discover that with some of your staff, as the accountability, they're not producing. You're going to have some people that just can't figure out the technology and really don't want to. Well, they can't be part of the Stadia staff if they don't want that. And so you're just going to have to kind of figure that out and know. And some people, if you're going back to just local expression, that's fine. But if you're staying in the digital world, you may have to transition some people into different roles or even off the team if they can't function in digital world. But be aware, digital is where everything's headed. And so we really have to have people that can do that. Okay, Janie, these are exciting times. I'm so grateful for you on our team. Everyone on this webinar, thanks so much for joining us. Please share this with your friends. Next week, next Thursday, we're going to be talking about what we're learning so far. And we have Rick Rusaw, who leads Spire Network, and Doug Parks, who leads Intentional Churches. Don't miss that, because lots of learnings from digital church. Get your senior pastors and leaders on that one, and be a very important time for us to share it together. Thanks, everyone. God bless you. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you.